He's muted. So.
He's muted. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the Seattle Crafter Meetup. We are a group that gets together once a month on the fourth Thursday of the month to talk about interesting and engaging speakers. Wait, no, that's Paige and I today. No, that's we talk about interesting topics, and what we talk about doesn't really involve a technology stack per se. It involves how we can get better at our craft. We talk about things that transcend language and technology and make us better developers all around, that help improve our lives as developers, either bringing back joy to the workplace somehow, some way, which makes you more productive, cutting down fewer hours, all sorts of different things. We have discussions like we just briefly had with about tech debt with Jay, and we talk about a myriad of things, and they all center around what we call code craft or craft. Yeah, code craft, not really craftsmanship, code craft being a bit more inclusive in how we talk about it. And we rely on people in the group and in the community, as well as other crafters that we know, to contribute to this. So anyone can come and have a discussion. Like, for instance, Dave Schinkel might talk next month on something. Hint, hint. Oh, wait, no. We currently do not have anyone signed up for July. I may or may not come up with something. Paige and I will talk about it. It also happens to be the exact same time as the Big Agile Conference, so it's getting harder to find speakers for that. We do have, in August, we have the mob mentality folks are coming to speak to us. Haven't put that up. Don't have a picture and a topic from them yet. And then let's see here. In September or August, we have Paul Moore. Or no, in September, we've got Paul Moore, and then October and November are still open for topics. There might be a few people here that will do that. And so anyway, we talk about these topics, and they're things that we hold dear to ourselves. And we hope that it gives inspiration and forethought into growing the crafter community, because Paige and I, selfishly, I'm speaking for Paige, I will speak for myself. Selfishly, I want more crafters out there because I love to code with other crafters, which is part of the inspiration of this talk. I want to say from the onset, and I'll let Paige speak in just a moment, is this is not an exclusive club, and it's not, there aren't boundaries that keep people out of it. We're here to try and grow that group so that there are more of us. Paige, do you have any thoughts you want to add to that or anything?
No, I think you said it well. It is not exclusive, and it's definitely, I think, with the continuing rise in the number of developers that we have, we really need to continue to focus on creating good code, using good practices, and developing our craft as opposed to just writing code and just doing stuff to produce. Do you want to jump into this? I think today we're just going to kind of have, I figure it's like more like an AMA type of discussion. Some of the things that Steve and I have found as we've worked over the years with different teams, and especially when we start to work with people who are also would consider themselves quality code crafters, and the differences that makes when you work with a group of people who are sort of like-minded in that process. So maybe we can just start out like, and actually I was thinking start out, we've got a quick little list of things here, but jump in if you have questions or comments, because I know there's several people here that have great understanding of this. But what what defines a crafter that we're talking about today in the sense of a software or crafter? What do we, what is it that makes someone a crafter versus a really smart developer, a good developer? Steve, do you have ideas on that? You want to start?
I'm going to fall back on, I think it's Kent Beck said, is I may not be a great developer, but I've got good habits. And to me, a crafter has good habits on how they code. It's different times I've talked about it is high quality coding techniques. If I fall back on what the current tech stack, what the current practices are for myself that help me do that is test-driven development, which has been around forever. I am continually looking for a better way to do it. There are some nuances to test-driven development. There's TCR and some other things that are evolving it, but I'm continually on the lookout for a better way to do it. Currently, for me, it's test-driven development in one way, shape, or form. There's collaborative development. I've evolved that. It used to be when I first started with it was pair programming. Now it's ensemble or teaming or mob programming, different names for it. But to me, it's the collaborative aspect of it. I know I've written code with a number of people here. In fact, I'm currently on a team with Dave Schinkel and Cody, and we do all ensemble programming. All day, every day, all the time, which is actually a new one for me. I'm used to only doing it for maybe 6 hours a day, whereas nope, boom, 8 hours a day of ensemble programming is a lot of programming. And then continuous integration, continuous deployment. Some of my other habits that I have right now are around bringing joy back into the workplace and finding a way to do things like dynamic reteaming, a process that helps ensure that we're not stuck in meetings talking about, what's your estimate on this? When's this going to be done? When's this? Or hearing the crack of the whip over you going, row faster, row faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. I agree a lot with pretty much all that you're saying, right? I think one of the things that really stands out with a person who would sort of say they're a code crafter or software crafter, or however we want to put that, is Tammy said it really nicely, is that they're looking for beauty in what's produced, but it's not only that, it's not only about my code. That's the thing. It's not about my code. I do a good job because there are great developers who do a really good job and write good code, but it's more about the sort of responsibility to the entire project, to the entire group or team you're working with, to the to the future. Right, that responsibility to the future of like, I might not be here someday working on this, but I want to make sure that it's at a point where whoever happens to be here can.
Mm-hmm. Cody had something.
Yeah, I wanted to say, so I wouldn't call myself a crafter until I learned some of these practices, very XP related. But I actually think, it's interesting thinking how I stumbled to that into XP in the first place. And I think I was thinking this whole time, and I think there's two things, and I'm sure there's more, but to me, maybe defining it would be somebody who is continuously improving. So always trying to get better. And then two, that is very important, is collaborative. They're not saying this is my code. They're collaborating across a team, trying to figure out, the only way that I'm going to get the best product is by working with everybody. And with doing both of those things, which before I was doing XP, was trying to do both of those, I ended up stumbling my way into into this group, and learning everything.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if that is a part of this as well.
I think that you've hit on a really key thing that I didn't mention, which is refactoring. And not only refactoring code, but refactoring myself. And for that, I take that mercilessly on both levels, in code and in myself. Where you grow and more mature more is knowing when you're gold plating stuff, when I'm doing too much self-improvement and I need to fall back and practice on what I've learned and make those into not only learning about something, but making it proficient and maybe become a master of it. And with code, it's, is this code good enough too? So absolutely. And collaboration to me, I mean, if you know me, you've probably heard me say everything I needed to know about programming, I learned in kindergarten, which I'm stealing from other people. But that is about collaboration. And I've seen it. I've got a video on my desktop of my 5-year-old and 7-year-old kids. My 7-year-old is programming a Minecraft mod in Java. The 5-year-old, who barely knows how to read, much less write Java, is sitting there pointing out, hey, your syntax is wrong. There's a red squiggle right there. Something's wrong with that. And kids innately know how to collaborate. And it's beaten out of us through grade school, high school, college, and certainly in the professional career to not collaborate. And we have to relearn all that and learn that it's okay.
So I would say, besides the code, making room for people is a crafts person. So that goes into psychological safety, which has been something I haven't seen until maybe now, I would say. I think I had some of that at Pillar, but there was some of that was not safe there too, right? Like, so I think it's the first place I've been where I felt like I don't have this weird feeling at all, like when I go into a mob or with my teammates, which is rare. And so I've been to several XP shops and they say they're crafters, but there's this political vibe you get that should not be there. And that's not craftsmanship to me. Like if you go and work with someone that we're crafters or we're craft oriented, you have to worry about stuff like if I can refactor, can I ask to refactor, can I do it? And that's a problem. That's not craftsmanship. It just it goes into a lot of things here, but one of the guys that I used to work with, I'm not gonna say where, but observed the same things I did. And he talked about stuff like right now I don't have to worry about anymore. Stuff like worry about what other team members are doing at all times. Who cares? I'm in this mob, I'm working with these people.
Mhm.
We're getting our stuff done. We trust each other, we're whatever. And so stuff like that. There's like short-sighted code decisions where people they're afraid to take responsibility because they might get in trouble for making a code decision. That doesn't exist here at Industrial Logic. Because we're working with seasoned practitioners, right? When you have people who are new to the craftsmanship community or say TDD and stuff like that, they're naturally going to be afraid because they're just new to the profession or they're just new to this whole thing, and so they tend to start having power struggles. Like, hey, I want to be lead, so I'm not gonna do some of these crafts things that we're supposed to do because if I do, I'll get in trouble, or by the higher ups because we're not getting shit done, or they sit there and struggle about political stuff. We don't have that here because we're just not that way. We're doing stuff for a long time. We have no reason to be that way. So it's a whole different feel when you have true crafts people versus people who say they are crafts people, but they don't support the safety, right? So
Right.
If the safety's up there, you're not craftspeople, right? Period. You're not. So
If you have to keep proving that you're awesome, then no. And it's the egoless programming sort of model where we all know we're not going to get into pissing matches with each other, right? And I'm not worried about what the other team is doing other than, oh crap, they're in the same code that I am. We're all on the main branch. oh, maybe I should go talk to them, find out where they're interacting with it, just so I know not to step on their code.
George, you've had your hand up. What do you have for us?
Well, I was just going to say along the lines of kids and red squigglies. Years ago, I read about the broken window syndrome. And, to me, it's sort of like one of the key differences when I'm working with other developers, I know how long they've been developing and whether they take it seriously is how much yellow is in the IDE. Where basically it's like, oh yeah, you've got imports that aren't being used anymore. You've got variables that aren't being referenced after you created them, and where literally they don't ever bother to format their code. And so it just takes longer to read. And to me, it's just sort of this whole, this idea of acting consistently and responsibly long-term kind of thing. And to me, it's just strange that people don't seem to care at all about whether or not their code is easy to read or it's got a 1,000-line method. Anyway, yeah.
So I think you're right on there, George. I want to kind of move back to some of the things that Dave was talking about, and this is another bullet point that we had to talk about is like, what is it like when you're working with a group of people who would call themselves crafters? What is that? What does it feel like in terms of a team? How does that team work together, versus other teams, right? And what are the benefits? What are the pitfalls or negatives? What are we finding with that?
Well, I'll jump in. Someone can please raise your hand or chime in as well too. Is one of the interesting things as being a coach and a developer is when I'm writing code with another developer or with another crafter or on a team with a whole bunch of other crafters, I don't have to coach. I don't have to worry about, hey, these people are not doing TDD. Or I don't have to worry about, hey, this code was written, not covered, or this person's off writing solo code. I don't have to worry about that. If I stumble across an implementation that is simple, I know someone's been doing Yagni, or they might have been doing some triangulation if I see some overlapping code or some duplicate code, and no one's going to yell at me for maybe refactoring that or improving it a little. It's just one of those things. To me, on that team, I'm on a team with a common set of core values. Now, not everything's shared, everyone doesn't have the exact same core value, but we all understand enough to know that we're doing the right thing. And it's not, I don't like the way Jay codes all these things. And so every time I see it, I'm going in and I'm correcting it. That's not the case. It's when Paige writes an else statement that I delete it.
Yeah, well, I just do that so that you have lots of stuff to delete. And I'll there's an interesting thing you were talking about. And when I was working with a team of several of you that are here in the very beginning, I was working in the evening and I was writing, I wrote some code and I put it on a branch and I was like, just because I wanted to save it, it was more like Spike and like, let's figure out how to do this. And I committed that and I'm like, put big words on the PR that was like, do not merge this. It was written solo and, let's talk about it tomorrow. And I came in the next day and it had been merged into main. And I was like, but I wrote it solo and why, and one of the people like said, well, but you know good practices, and we could see that you'd written good tests, and you know, you know, and like we know you know how to write code in a quality practice way. Yeah, and we trust you, like, so that was fine. Right. It was just, it was weird. It kind of threw me off because I tend to be totally against, you know, sort of take your work and go away and come back with it. But that's not the whole idea. The idea there was more that we all understand the good practices, and because we all understand it, that trust existed. That trust that the code is going to be written well, that the communication is going to be there, that the belief in the practices that we all agree to, and having those agreements and being able to discuss those agreements and change those agreements as we need. That was one of the things that I really, really noticed. Jay?
Another thing that I see show up around that is, in some contexts, making a change is risky. And so, of course, we need to take extra precaution and wait until everybody has had time to look at it and so on. And in other cases, we have great tests in the system already. The code is already clean. We know how to roll back, whatever. And so, okay, we merged your change because it might be wrong. If it's wrong, we'll discover that really quickly and we'll deal with it. And we're so confident that we can handle that. So you were talking about like culture and trust, and those things are important, but there's this other dimension of safety in the system, and I don't know what else to put in that category. Anyway, it's a second category.
Would that be, Jay, the trust but verify?
I don't think I would call it that.
Okay.
It's like we know that the stakes are low. It's not quite that either.
Your exposure, your risk exposure is low.
Yeah.
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 Uh-huh.
And it comes from, go ahead.
That and it's also you're able to make mistakes without being slapped, right? Mistakes happen, and we're not going to slap you on the hand for that. So it's those two together, really. So if you merge something that's going to break something or doesn't, whatever, we're not gonna just kick you in the ass for it. That's part of the safety aspect of that too. So,
which does also have context depending on what the software is as well. But you know, there's ways you can get around that. But
George,
good call out.
I was just going to say that it's one of the key things I love about feature flagging is that, you know, if the tests pass, I can check in with, like, without having to worry about code merging or anything like this. It's I know I have 100% confidence that code is not going to be reached.
right. That's another of the good habits, right?
Exactly.
That's one of the habits that allows me to not worry about breaking things unexpectedly if I'm in a risky area. You know, so thinking about this too is there are high performing teams that don't have crafters on them that have some of these similar things that people are able to write code. There's a lot of trust, there's a lot of psychological safety, you can do experiments, you can do things like that. And generally those teams, when I've been on them, are highly siloed teams. It's like, oh, that area, you know, the dealing with the back end, well, that's Paige, or dealing with the database, that's Jay, or Cody's expert in Jira, so he's doing all that. But the difference between that and a crafter team is, I think the record that we had at Primera was from the time that a new hire was released to development from HR to their name on their first check-in was 15 minutes. And similarly with the project that IL has going, I think the record's around an hour. It's a little bit more of a setup thing, but there's being able to have people throw in and just hit the ground running. 15 minutes, that's hitting the ground running to me as a developer. George?
I was just going to say that, one of my proudest things that I didn't get paid for was, basically a 6-hour pairing interview.
Mhm.
Where they did a war pairing, that in a sense that, I don't know if that's the right term. Basically, every like 40 minutes, the bell would ring and everyone would get up except me and rotate one seat to the left,
Mhm.
so that I could pair with all of them.
Yeah.
And so I own the story as basically not even a hire. And when I was done, they said, "Yeah, it looks good. We're gonna commit it tonight into production."
Uh-huh.
And again, I didn't know the domain from the business side, but I knew the domain I knew half the domain from the perspective of how to code it. And this is why, to me, it's like, it makes zero sense not pairing, just from a training perspective,
Mhm.
an onboarding perspective.
So I mean, this is the first time I've mobbed before, but usually I've been pairing at shops I've been before. So we're all mobbing, which allows me to jump around to be useful where I feel I can be useful, or get context where I want to get context. So that's the first time I've actually done this before. It's just amazing. I come into work, I'm like, yeah, what mob do I want to go to for half the day or full day, whatever.
Mhm.
It's awesome. Like I know it would be awesome, right? But if I'm finally doing it with several mobs, multi-mobs, and it's just amazing how dynamic and just fluid it is, and we're getting value out the door. It's until I've done it, pairing is not as safe. You get a person that is not doesn't provide that safety, it's horrible. You get nothing done, or they do everything and there's no say, right? And so mobbing is just, I feel like it's the way to go. And if it's outstanding. I've coached on mobbing, I've mobbed with teams, but I've never been in a situation where I've been programming in multi-mobs. And it's just, you can't explain it. It's very productive. So
It's dynamic reteaming.
it is, yeah. And we have some of the same things where, like, hey, we kind of remind ourselves we need to switch mobs, right? You don't always mob the same people, but that's like the only thing we have to worry about. Like, that's the least of our, it's the biggest problem we have, right? Which is not a problem. It's like everything else just flows, because we all get each other. So the stuff that I've seen teams struggle with before, waste time on, is that psychological safety, and that just drains a team. Drains the whole team, and nothing gets done. People leave, and it's just, you don't want that. You can't have that. If you're going to be mobbing, you can't have that. If you're going to be pairing, you can't have that situation. So yeah, anyways, yeah, it's great.
Jay, and then Dimitri, will get to you in a sec.
Yeah. So I heard you talk about new developer first day ships to production in 15 minutes or an hour. The first time I heard that story, I was stunned. Like, how can that even be possible? Around here, I wouldn't trust that. I wouldn't trust the newbie. I wouldn't trust myself after 3 months. Like, what I later realized is that's attainable pretty much everywhere. It's well understood how to get from here to there, and it's just a decision. Yeah, we're going to make that true here, and that means that all the teams where that's not true, that's some kind of blame is appropriate. It says you have failed to take this action that you should take. That's on you. That you're not a victim of the situation, you are a creator of the situation. And I think that there's so that reframes the assessment from, like, our sense of normal should include things like new developership to production on the first day. And anybody who is not able to do that, they're below expectations and need to like frame it that way. All right, I'm losing my room.
Yeah. I think that's very valid, and that's one of the things that create an environment where things can't not happen if you're trying to adopt change. And if you have leading metrics or metrics like that, where it's like, what is the lag time between a new developer coming on the team and their name on a production change? Make that a metric and work on improving it. Right, Demetrius?
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit on the definition of a crafter, because we mentioned like things like some best practices, but also mention some, let's say, character traits. For example, like have the mindset of continuous improvement, like being like want to create a safe environment for everyone to like express their opinions.
Yep.
I think that. So I think the crafter, or like we can also split that. It's like two things. One is the practices that continuously evolves as the whole industry evolves, like, and we find new things to basically increase the quality of the delivery. Like, and then the quality is also like a very big thing. Like, how do you define quality? Like, for me, I would say, okay, let's say we develop code faster and we deliver faster, and like it's easier to change, but like this is another whole discussion, right? But then there is also the character traits, which for me are always a prerequisite to have like a crafter team the way we define it. But we might have those traits in teams that, let's say, they're not crafter teams because basically the organization is not allowing them to be. And I think this needs to be separated somehow. Like, so there is like the traits of the people that need to be there to do those practices, right? You cannot do XP if you don't have a psychological safety. And then it's like the practices. And the interesting thing is that the one is always there. Like the traits, I don't think they change since like, I don't know, maybe the beginning of world, right? Like to have a good working team, no matter if they're doing coding or playing basketball or I don't know, whatever they're doing, like you need those traits there, right? But the practices are more transient and they evolve and they change. So I think like maybe there a differentiation between those two things would help like to make the definition easier.
I think that's a very good point. When I started talking about high quality, I want to deliver in high quality. So my current way of doing that is test-driven development. And if anyone here has a better way to do it than that, let me know. Email me after this. Happy to chat with you about it, because again, always on the lookout for something better. I think that, yeah, there are current practices that we currently agree on or are fluid. There's a group of practices. You know, we say collaborative development. You know, it could be pairing. Dave, I've had some awesome pairing sessions, and I'm a fan of pair programming. You and I can talk about that later. Pair with Paige in real life, it gives you a background. Oh, wait, no, that's wrong type of pair programming. But yeah, you know, it's saying that the technique pairing, ensemble, dynamic reteaming, those are all different techniques that get down to the inspiration or down to the ideal
traits
of collaborative. Yeah. No, I think that's a very, very good thing to talk about. Yeah. Todd.
Yeah, you gave the example of getting people doing their first commit in 15 minutes. I think the interesting part of that is you have this underlying assumption that not everybody has, which is your goal is to make more people successful. And a lot of us have worked in environments where some people have the mindset of, well, let's filter out the bozos early. And let's make them do a commit in 15 minutes so we can find out if they're a bozo. And then let's set a goal that they have to have this many commits done by the end of the day so that we can find out if they're a bozo. And we've been in environments like that where it's like, oh man, this is a horrible way to start off.
Yeah, well, that brings up a really interesting point of you have a new hire that comes in and you want to find out if they're a bozo or not. And the interview loop for IL for this new project was one 30-minute text screen that could go as short as 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. And another was a 1 hour pairing ensemble session. That's it. And it's not ensemble on anything special. And the interview, the screen, was basically me doing the 6-minute Llewellyn Falco's 6-minute interview. Now I've modified that a little. But to be completely honest, in that 6-minute interview, you can tell if someone's a crafter within about 30 seconds, maybe a minute.
I would actually amend that. You could, maybe they're not a crafter, but there's someone that you can work with that will grow into someone who will work with the team. You'll know that fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Which kind of, sorry, kind of like brings me to another point that I wanted to discuss, and because I think it's important. You were talking about not hiring bozos, and fine, we can use that word, but I think that we filter out those people that don't want to be part of the teams that we're working on, don't want to work in this way. And I think we do it through the online, quick, the 6-minute interview is a great way to do it. But then, but then if they move on past that, we actually were mobbing with them on work that would go into production. Why, like, this is the work we do every day. These are the people you're going to work with. Why not put them in that place and see if, one, they want to do that, and two, we want to do that with them.
Yep.
Right. So there is sort of that filter there, because there are some people who are really great developers, but don't want to work in ways that I would say are important for those high performing crafter teams. But even more so, maybe there's a, like, how do we, if we talk about how we grow our craft and the people that find that important, how do we interview for that? How do we bring those people on? And what is it that we look for when we're trying to hire new people to join our team, even if they don't have all the experience or the necessary understanding of how to do everything we do.
Sorry, can I jump in really quickly? This is
Yeah.
exactly why I said this thing before, because for example, let's say you have a junior person that they don't know TDD, they don't know CI/CD, but they have this mentality of, okay, yeah, I want to learn more stuff, I want to improve continuously. So if you see those traits, you're like, okay, this is a person who can grow in a crafter, let's say in a year even. I think this is why we need to look to differentiate. It's like the traits for a potential crafter, and then you are a crafter, we could say, if you also practice those things, right? Yep.
And so that is why I've taken the 6-minute interview and I've developed a half-an-hour screen around that interview. I can easily, and to be fair, when you talk to Llewellyn about this, the one purpose of the 6-minute interview is to tell if you want to invest more of your time, your company's time, and the candidate, other person's time to learn more. That's the only thing that it really answers. And with that is, in that screen for the industrial logic folks, we were looking for crafters, period. We were not looking for potential. We had a bar, we had to meet that bar, and that bar was high. Now, at other places when I've done this, it's, number one, the number of crafters out there are very small and very rarely get them. In fact, I've interviewed outside of IL roughly 250 people with this, and I've only interviewed maybe 3 that are crafters. There are a number of people that have potential, and that's what the rest of that half-hour screen does, is get the potential underneath. Are they someone that wants to learn, to challenge themselves? Are they open to different ideas? And can they talk about things? Do they have passion in their lives? All these different things. I've spent quite a bit of time perfecting this technique. And it continually evolves too. I don't want to be blindsided with things, and I'm sure I've missed candidates that had potential, but that's where me as a crafter, I'm always looking for ways to improve that and find where I missed.
I want to add on to something I was saying earlier. It kind of goes, it's in line with this conversation of, again, some of the qualities of maybe somebody who eventually will fall their way into craft, being in a crafter position. Again, I said continuous self-improvement, collaborative. I think there's a third thing, and I don't know the best way to word it, but it's like pursuit of clarity. So knowing what is the bare minimum of kind of what needs to get done. Because that's very important in terms of like, should we even be focusing on this thing? And I think those are all three things you pretty much are able to gather out of the 6-minute interview.
Again, I don't want to focus and make this all around that, that one technique, because to me, the feeling I get when I pop on or I pair with someone at a conference and they're a crafter, it's a joy. It's like getting into, I'm going to use an analogy that maybe Matt Plavican can give more information to. It would be like me getting into a rally car, me being maybe a rally driver, and someone else who's used to being a rally navigator. You get into that car and you drive and you go. You know that person knows the job and it's fun, rather than Paige and I getting into now real life. I'm not a rally driver. Paige isn't a rally navigator. We get into the car and we fight over who's going to drive. Where are we going to go? Do you know the course? Yeah, let's just go. It's fumbling around. Or a real rally driver with someone that doesn't know how to navigate and be like, I'm driving into trees.
So I also add that the caveat of that is being able to slow down and talk about things.
Yeah.
It's safe to do so, right? We do that all the time. Where are we headed as a mob? Where are we headed as a pair? I rarely see that other places. It's just, hey, we got a code. Where the hell are we going? What's the context here, right? Let's refocus on that first and then go. We do that a lot when we mob at IL, right? We were able to do that. That's part of the flow. That gets us into the flow and moving rather than like we're lost, right? So that's a huge thing that is part of the flow that we have and other places need to have. And they don't have that yet. They don't feel safe to have that yet.
Mm-hmm. I just typed in, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And a quote that I love is, the best line of code I can write is the line I don't write. Being able to slow down and say, hey, do we really need this? Or do we need it this way? I love coding. So I love coding with all the folks here that I've coded with, but I'm going to call out Cody right now because he's one of the people that constantly says, you know what? Simple as possible. Yagni. This is going to be dumb. This is going to be stupid, but let's start with this. Yeah.
Make it as gross as possible too. This is actually something that what you brought up, the else statement is kind of a joke. Paige adding an else statement, you'd remove it. We found that sometimes when you do things like that, it draws your attention so well that if you are doing simple as possible and are looking to want to extend that, doing something awful maybe makes it easier to remember. Oh yeah, I want to refactor that to maybe the right thing later.
Mm-hmm.
Found that as a useful technique while trying to figure things out while it's still malleable.
Amber, who we work with, she has a wonderful thing, and I've been starting to do it more, and Llewellyn and Jay do this all the time, is don't worry about naming anything, just put applesauce. By default, applesauce. Even if it's a quick, simple name, just put applesauce. Amber puts pants, and I just get, I chuckle with it because it's pants. Okay, don't forget your pants. To me, that one simple technique that I'm trying to grow with more actually leads to me coding faster. Because even that little bit of time that I spend thinking, oh, this is tablet to tablet communication, blah, blah, and I put that in, I am going to adjust that name anyway. And if I put pants in there or applesauce, it's just quick and simple. And if I'm on a team of crafters, a lot of times, maybe if the first time I do it, they question it. But then after that, it's, oh, yeah, go for it.
I'm gonna have to say, I'm not used to that yet. I'll let it go. For me, context is everything. So even if it's a bad name, it tells me context of where we're going. So I mean, I might grow into that, but for me, it's like, where are we headed with this variable? Okay, applesauce. What does that mean? I mean, the variable name is where we're headed, right? Like, what is it? What are we trying to do? Even down to the variable, right? So I mean, I could probably go into it, but I'm almost the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm still with you guys. I'm great. I love it. I let it go, but my mind's like, what applesauce? What the hell? What?
Yeah.
Sure.
What are we trying to do here?
I like the 5-second rule, because really what saying applesauce or pants here is doing is, you can spend so much time trying to come up with the best name. And sometimes you don't even know what you're doing. You got to get your hands dirty before you figure out what the walls look like. So I like the 5-second rule.
Yeah.
What is this thing called? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pants. All right, let's move on.
Yep. So yes, and yes, I'm pointing at Cody and Dave. Absolutely. And yes. The other thing that I fall back on, actually, this is from my family doctor, who's been voted one of the best family physicians in the greater Seattle area, like 30 times out of the last 35 years, something like that. Is he hates medical applications that require you to click boxes as to what diagnoses are. That confines him too much, and that constrains his diagnosis. And to me, as soon as you start putting names in there, that constrains me from doing maybe the right thing, which is going outside of those bounds. And having just a placeholder that is pants or applesauce allows me the freedom to come back and go, oh, I actually did find a completely different way to do that. And it's really named t-shirt. I don't know. Yeah.
What's cool about where we work is we can talk about this and have a debate for 10 seconds and move on, right? Like Cody's going to do his applesauce. Okay, fine. And we're still happy when there's no politics at play. There's, no one's pissed at each other. Like, oh my God, Dave just said he doesn't like to do that.
Yeah.
He's in trouble. That doesn't exist. Like, I let it go, do your applesauce, whatever. I'll work with it. That's the true craftsmanship quality, I think, that I like when I go into work. We can have debates, we can, not very long, whatever, but we don't have to worry about anything. We just keep flowing, right? And eventually Cody will be like, I know Dave doesn't like applesauce. And stuff like that is fun, right? Like, yeah. we know each other, and we make jokes about that. We don't make it political, right? So
yeah, we have the security and the safety to be able to say, I think that's a horrible idea. Let's go try that.
Or I think it's horrible, but just go do your thing. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Right.
That willingness to experiment and be able to spend the time to actually discover better ways is a key portion that crafters manifest. And I think we by extension create that environment and the umbrella where others that work with us are able to experience that feeling and begin to, again, manifest their own security with experimentation and ambiguity.
Yeah. And so, like, to your point, Matt, me being able to stop and say, I'm not going to do it my way. Let's try your way. That's rare to have. And everybody on the team I work with has that, where they check themselves once in a while and just say, I'm going to stop doing my thing. Let them do their thing. And that's awesome. So.
Something I didn't notice until just now. And so I haven't been on this team for super long. I guess now it's been 4 months, so it's, I mean, that's a while. These are all senior coaches at Industrial Logic on these teams, like 12 of us. We've all been around the block quite a few times. Never once have I seen two people debating, well, I want to do it this way. No, I want to do it the other way. I want to type way A is better, way B is better. And there's a discussion that generally ends up going for an hour or half an hour or something. And then traditionally, the way I would intervene as a coach, I would say, well, it sounds like we need a 5-minute spike on each. And we both, and they go off and they spike on that and come back. And I have never once seen that type of discussion on this team, on this group. It's all been, hey, I think I got a way to do it. And there might be, I have another way, a quick talk about it. And it's like, okay, we'll go with that way or that way. Doesn't matter. I don't care.
So I want to kind of bring this back around. Like we've been talking a lot about what's really good about, you know, working with other people who are crafters, why we enjoy it and that sort of thing. What does a company get out of a team of crafters versus a team of good, really great, brilliant developers? Like, how do we sell this idea that this is important to a company? Because I think we understand it's important to us as developers, and you know, we know that if we've been on these high performing, really quality code practice using teams, it's like a drug, and you just want to get back there and, you know, oh my gosh, somebody pair with me and let's quick set up a CI/CD pipeline and get it, and you know, all this sort of thing. How do we sell this to companies as this is what's important, or this will work because the Dimitri?
Maybe should we define what is a brilliant developer? Because I would say a crafter is also a brilliant developer, right? So like
I agree, and maybe that's a good what I mean is someone someone that's very smart, that knows the language very well, has a really good domain understanding, you know, knows how to write code that gets things done in an efficient manner, and you know, all those sort of things that I think make a good developer, but not necessarily a crafter. I think that crafters are, I agree, they're often quite good developers on top of it, but I don't know that they necessarily, you know, have to be. I think they just become that eventually. But does that answer your question? Does that make the distinction?
Yeah, I think I know the direction you're going for, but like it's also a bit more complicated. For example, let's say if you have a brilliant developer that is, I don't know, very good at developing features, but it's like just working on their own, and then they're basically a huge silo for the team. Like, is this now a brilliant developer or not? Like,
So,
where's the line? Is it just technical skills, let's say?
yeah. So I've worked at a company that had a brilliant developer. He graduated at 21 from Stanford with his master's in software development. Smart guy. I was hired onto a project with the sole purpose of wrangling him. Okay, so that's a brilliant developer. This guy can write a ton of code. No one's going to understand it. It may not be necessary. It works mostly. But yeah. And I would certainly, and if he's listening to this right now, no, there's more to it than that, because he is a good friend of mine. But my term for a brilliant developer is someone who is smart. It would be the equivalent of someone who specialized in making cabinets, and they can make awesome cabinets. They can make fantastic cabinets, but you don't want them doing your roofing or framing or something like that, because he doesn't have good habits that transcend different things.
George?
So the queuing theory session we had and talking about the cost of doing code reviews, and that the only good code review size was 0, right? And so when you look at this and you basically say, what is the fundamental difference, in my opinion, at its core between pairing at a minimum but mobbing preferred and brilliant developers, is that you don't get the situation where you have code that is maybe perfect, but solving the wrong problem. Because this is, to me, the fundamental thing that pairing brings is that, at a minimum, is that if you and I are pairing and we can't agree, obviously, what the thing we're building is, we just don't make an assumption and move on. We go get clarification, and so it's, and when you add in the fact that, when I'm pairing, my model is, if the other developer says, I don't understand this, that's a red flag, right? And it's like, stop what you're doing and figure out how to explain it, how to document it, how to recode it so that it is obvious to them, because there's nothing closer to the poor maintenance person trying to fix your code in 6 months than the people you're pairing with right now. And so to me, it's like, when you start adding in queuing theory and the mess that is, any organization that doesn't believe that they need to get rid of code reviews and deal with pairing at a minimum and mobbing preferably is barely worth working for. And I mean, saying that with someone who likes to have a living and doesn't want to retire yet.
Yeah, well, and I think that actually brings up a really, really strong point, is that crafters, I talk about it with Paige. I said, Paige, I'm sorry I introduced you to CodeCraft and working this way and working on a high-performing team full of crafters, because you're forever going to be looking for that high again.
Yeah. Yep. That's always the fear, right? Can we find that high again?
I can also say that I've worked as a coach at a number of different places where they bring me in to upskill their teams and to do transformations of different sorts. And generally, those organizations aren't prepared for all the change that is required by that. And there are generally 1 or 2 developers that clue in, and that, if I'm lucky, 1 to 2 developers that clue in and really get it and want to do it and keep doing it, and they leave the company looking for a place to do it. Yeah.
Once you do it once, yeah, I can't look back. Yeah, when I interview at companies, it's the red flags I look for. I mean, I've literally walked out right at the beginning of the interview process because I'm like, okay, nope, this is not that style of environment. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I've gone into interviews and where they give me a whiteboard and I make the joke, so what size whiteboard am I going to be issued to write my code on when I start here? And if no one laughs at that or clues into that, that's something to, it's like, hey, when I'm interviewing in a company, I'm certainly looking for CodeCraft. So we are at the top of the hour. Traditionally, we transition to Q&A. This whole thing has been Q&A, but I wanted to actually take a brief pause to allow people to transition away as needed. Paige and I will still be here. We will keep this conversation going, and as long as it does until the popcorn stops popping. I would like to thank everyone for showing up. Again, Seattle Crafter Meetup. We meet on the fourth Thursday of the month. July may or may not happen this year. Actually, July 3rd, I think, July 3rd, I am showing up on the Mob Mentality Show. If you want, you can tune into that. The Mob Mentality folks are fantastic. It was great fun to be there for that. They will be here in August. Paul Moore will be here in September. I actually am remembering, I think there's another person that's here today that's going to be in October. And yeah, if you're interested in talking, especially if you can do July, the fourth Thursday in July, let me know. I would love to have a quick discussion with you about that. We're pretty welcome.
What was that invitation I just missed? Pardon me.
Two of them. One is I'm on the Mob Mentality Show airing July 3rd. And the other is if you would like to talk about something to do with Codecraft in the fourth Thursday of July, email me or Paige or reach out via Meetup, and we can certainly talk about it and probably get you in. All right, so questions, George?
Not really so much a question. It's your comment about bad interviewing and walking out. And I walk into Staples and there's these room full of tiny little cubicles. I mean, not even cubicles, tables with walls between them. And then I go in to interview and they said, well, you have to use this tool to interview. And I says, well, I don't know that tool. I would just it would give me a bad performance. And they says, well, but we can't compare you against everyone else. And I said, well, I'm going to just save you some time and I'll just leave now. And they're like, what? And I says, if you're hiring for average, I'm not it. Yeah. And you know, and that was it. It was, but I'm just saying it's like walking in and you see the way they're orchestrating the people, and you know that you don't want to work there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interviews are them interviewing you just as much as you are interviewing them.
Yeah.
Yep. Dimitri?
I have a question. So, like if we all agree, I mean, like maybe we're all biased here, but let's say we agree that, let's say the way of the crafter, it's the best way to develop software for you because you're happy the way you develop, right? And also you deliver results for a company. My question would be, what in your opinion, and like everyone can jump in, like is the main reason this is not spread like everywhere? Because like, as you said, it's difficult to find places that work like this. And I think I agree. And like, why?
That's the main question, isn't it?
It's to me, it's very simple. It fundamentally boils down to the concept that I'm not going to pay two people or more to do the work of one.
Well, there's that. I've been asking that question for probably going on 20 years now. And it's nuanced, as with everything. Number one, most non-developers don't understand it. The number of developers doubles, and this statistic came from Bob Martin. I've never confirmed it. The number of developers doubles every 5 years. So right now, if you have 5 years experience, you have more experience than half the industry. Right? Codecraft, not taught in schools. They touch on TDD. They may or may not do anything with collaborative development. They may touch on it. Everything, not everything. Most things about Codecraft are counterintuitive. What do you mean writing tests? So testing something I don't even know what I'm going to do will save me time. and make it more effective. TDD. What do you mean? You mean to tell me that a group of 6 people is more efficient than 6 individuals writing code? Very counterintuitive. You talk to people in business about refactoring. I've heard it many times. Why didn't you write it right the first time? Yeah,
I think that you're going to hear like a couple of themes that we all have, encountered, and I think money. It comes down to this belief that it costs more or takes longer or whatnot. But really, I think that one of the biggest parts of the issue is that talking more from a business or management side, I don't think that we go through school, we learn to manage based on Tayloristic practices. We learn, this worked before, this has always worked in manufacturing and product development and that sort of thing. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way for complex solutions like software, right? It works good for complicated things. It works good for manufacturing, but software development is not manufacturing. And therefore, I think that oftentimes it's like Steve was saying, it's hard to wrap your head around these ideas about what we know work really well, collaborative programming and working with making sure the flow is better and faster and getting rid of all those gates, when it's sort of the not even understanding the concept, not even understanding the domain. And so it's really hard to say, well, that sounds fine, because if it's something that I haven't learned and I have no real understanding of, I can't even really make a decision that whether it's better or not. Right. And I think that again, going back to money, I think there's a financial aspect that stops businesses from wanting to improve and do the processes and the practices that are necessary for a complex solution or endeavor like software. Does that make sense? And George, you had more comments on that?
So when you factor in theory X versus theory Y management, and you basically, as you pointed out, the Taylorism aspect, early on in my career, software development was related to project management for construction. And, it wasn't until, maybe a couple of years later that I had someone say, dude, it's not project management of construction, it's project management of architecture. So if you look at it from a building perspective, it's not the building of the building that matters from a software perspective, it's the design of the architect job. And how many people decide, well, yes, I know I haven't quite engineered the foundation, but I'm going to start putting the walls up. And that's more or less where what part of the main problem. And then you get to this fact that, and I don't know if any of you have been a manager of software developers. I think you must have, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things is that if you're not secure in your mind about yourself, when you start doing pairing and mobbing, your ability to quote unquote directly manage people is wiped out. And so you end up having to basically have enough internal confidence to live with the fact that people are going to tell you to your face, yeah, that isn't going to work.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I have been a manager. I've been director. I've done those roles. To me, when I manage people, I'm a developer. I hate having to do reviews. Reviews are a necessary evil in some ways, and having data behind it. But to me, my role as a manager is to get people's hands on keyboards as much as possible and get them out of meetings, and to help figure out what they need to learn so that they can grow. The best way for me to do that is to write code with them. So as a manager, I would sit down with the ensembles, with pairs, and I would write code. And the whole thing about review time to me is I've been pairing, ensembling with these folks for the last quarter, for the last year. I know where their deficiencies are. And I can talk about it. I can talk how they're growing. I can tell where they know in the system, all this stuff, because I've been there. I've worked with them. I got dirty in the mud with them. I rolled in the mud. Most managers that I've met think about that as, I have this clipboard here, and I just walk around and I'm checking on the delivery line, check, check, check. And I am observing my chess pieces on a board, and I talk about it that way. And so I have to have one-on-ones to meet with them and find out what they're doing rather than actually doing it with them. And to me, I don't like working at places where the managers are just observing. To me, managers have to be in the trenches to do their jobs effectively. That's my philosophy on management. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the issue that I was kind of bringing up. Like, you find that people who came up through a development career and are now managing have a much greater understanding of process change and what we need in terms of how we do development than the MBA type of, got the management job. And I don't want to disparage them, because there's, it's not about what degree you have or whatnot. I'm just saying there's an understanding, there's a difference in understanding. And so if we want this sort of adoption, more adoption, that maybe we wait for more people to come up through the ranks who have been developers and become, or maybe there needs to be a change in the schooling and learning and understanding, but it definitely is that, like, and that's why that works for you, Steve. Like, you've been in that development trench part, and you understand, and so you want to sort of work with them to learn what they're doing, etc.
If I may, before we pass off to Todd.
Yeah.
For people who are managers, and I have been in the past, I recently read 9 Lies About Work, and I highly recommend it, because one of the key things in there is talking about reviewing people and how basically no one can do it, and because it's all subjective, and you end up keeping people you like, as opposed to necessarily people that are effective. And it actually proposes a statistical way of reviewing people, where the manager doesn't actually do the reviewing. Anyways, highly recommend. It has some other cool of the other 8 lies. Some of the other ones are also worth reading. Just
right. There are lots of different ways that are being experimented on and tried. Teal organizations are starting to push the envelope with that. Peer-to-peer reviews. Everyone has biases, absolutely, and trying to mitigate those biases. Yes, but as I think someone was saying, Jeff Miller was saying in chat, why managers? I'm questioning why managers, because that is Taylorism. Why can't we be self-managed? And that was one of the fights I had at Primera. Sorry, I'm not supposed to mention places. Is trying to get reviews and compensation based off of the team. How did the team perform? all the team was completely on board with taking the merits based off of the work that they produced across the board. The organization said, no, we can't do that. We do individuals. Why not? And I couldn't rate everyone on the team the same because everyone has to be different. But yeah, that's a whole different axe to grind. Maybe we could talk about that in July. Todd.
Yeah, management's hard. You were talking about the case where a manager is trying to figure out what to do, and I'm reading the book right now by John Osterhaus, A Philosophy of Software Design, and he coins the phrase tactical tornado, a person who goes in and cranks out code really fast and gets results, but everyone else on the team just loathes going in to work on that code after the fact.
That's a brilliant developer.
And when the manager who doesn't understand code looks at results from the tactical tornado versus someone else on the team, they're like, yeah, this person's cranking out stuff. I've got to go with what they're proposing because I'm seeing results. And it results in that long-term cost. It makes the crafter argument hard.
So I have seen that tactical tornado, and I'm going to step back to the conversation earlier, where yes, that brilliant person on the team is rushing forward. They're writing the domain specific language on the weekend and everyone's going to use it. And all the other people, they're not adding new code. All they are is fixing all these bugs. Right? So why do we have a team of 5 people fixing all these bugs in this new domain language that the one guy wrote on the weekend while he's off writing more code? And he's getting all the kudos, whereas the rest of the team's cleaning up after them.
HR keeps hiring all these slow developers.
Exactly. I did get 2 quotes. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. Over the last week, I heard 2 memorable quotes from the crafter team that I was working on. If you want the opportunity to interact with a lot of people on a project you just joined, introduce a bug. And then another one, if I were to start a new team, bring on new team members with an existing team, and I had the option of a crafter who doesn't know the tech stack or a non-crafter who really knows the tech stack. So for instance, React Native. So do I bring on a crafter that doesn't know React Native or a non-crafter who really knows React Native? And this person said, I'd never thought about it before, but now after experience this here, hands down, without a doubt, I would bring in a crafter. Yes, George.
I would agree unless I have 0 expertise on the team in that technology. And in that case, I would do my best to hire for a week a contractor who can teach the rest of the team. But if I don't have that choice, then I might go down the path of bringing in some expertise, even if I have to hire them.
So it's been our experience with a full team of crafters that is not the case, because you don't want a wild card in there writing code that does not adhere to the team's standards, and you don't have time, number one, to ramp them up on CodeCraft, because that's a lot more difficult than ramping someone up on React Native. And they're constantly, this is my bias and my personal experience, they're constantly saying, well, why can't I just write this on my own? I'm just going to go off and write this. I know you're going to lunch. I'm in a different time zone. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to write this code, and then you can review it when you come back from lunch.
Mindset change rather than learning a tool.
Yep.
Yeah, a whole value system. I really like this quote that Dimitri wrote here. It takes weeks/months to learn React. It takes years to become a crafter. Really like that.
Yep.
I just came off an 8-week POC, and there was no time to raise developers, unfortunately.
I like what you said, George, about consultation, though. I think that is something interesting.
What was that?
Like we were saying, like if you have the choice of hiring the expert for a week to basically consult, teach, I would say I think that scenario, yeah, that'd be the quickest place to get off the ground running. If you have a team of crafters that don't know something, but you bring somebody in that does know something, but only to teach,
Yeah.
rarely, and maybe have a hotline. Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Like an iOS expert that we could do
John Reed. Yeah.
yeah. Make a lifeline call to.
Yeah.
Right. But he's a craft. There, please let me no, John Reed is a crafter, but he's our lifeline for iOS stuff on the project we're on.
Having read the mobbing book, I will say that one of the key things that changed my mind, that got me to start promoting it 100%, was the idea that, yeah, that one was the idea that you know, a large portion of your team aren't developers. They're effectively domain experts in something. Right. And that means that suddenly it's like, I don't have to go off and figure out how the hell I'm going to do iOS, right? Or Android or Compose now.
Yeah. The burden is no longer entirely on my shoulders as the lead to know everything about the language, where we're going, the state of the code. That can be offloaded, not offloaded. The burden is not mine. It is shared amongst everyone.
Yeah,
All
there's
the brilliant minds.
there's no, hey, you didn't crush it. I've heard that before. I've gotten hired and said, hey, you didn't crush it, Dave. Like, what the hell are you talking about? This is a team sport.
Yep.
I don't know everything. I'm a crafter. I've coded for 20 years, but crushing is not craftsmanship, right? Like, why are you talking about crushing it? If you're doing pairing and mobbing, that's not pairing and mobbing, right?
Yeah.
So.
I want to go back really quick to one question about why hasn't this caught on? I talked about how pairing is ensemble is counterintuitive. I did a stint at, let's see here, one of the top 3 mobile carriers. I'll let you do the math on that one. And I was in their handset replacement group. And I did a 18-month, 2-year stint with them. They had quarterly nights, weekends of deployments, which were hell. It was a blame fest. People were crying. They would have 300 to 600 bugs every release, high priority. There was lead up, a code freeze of 3 weeks, and then 6 weeks of fireside chats afterwards, fixing all the bugs. You know, that's every quarter. If you're talking about 9 weeks out of a quarter dedicated to code freeze and fixing bugs of some sort, that's a lot of time. When I left, they were doing TDD, they were doing pairing, was older, so they were doing pairing. When we did our initial release, the last release that I was there for, we had, I want to say 3 bugs, defects that were actually Sev 2 or Sev 3, and they were typos. They were text typos, so not super high priority, really. We started with 13 teams. We got that down to 9 teams when I had left. A new VP came in because the old VP got his money and left. And so I no longer had support. And that VP came in and said, looked around. And even though we had churned through all our backlog for the year, this was October, we churned through all our backlog. He came in and he looked at all the teams in the Bay and saw everyone pairing and doing their stuff. He's like, I know a way we could double productivity. That was my second to last day on the job. And for those that didn't get the underlying subtext, is he wanted pairing used to be mandatory. He said, nope, you don't have to pair anymore. Which the one team of folks that we'd sequestered that had resisted everything then spread out and said, yeah, we win.
But actually, wouldn't that in this specific situation where you have samples from both practices, it would be actually easy to convince them this is wrong, because like, let's say you did the pairing, you can have some like KPIs for that. And then when you change back to the old ways, like you also have KPIs. I think this is one of the big problems with all those best practices, that you cannot have experiments doing like, let's say the good practice and the opposite, and then measure both and say, okay, this is better clearly. This is why it's also hard to convince people, I think.
Yes, absolutely. We could have gone down the experiment saying, fine, let's all do solo dev for the next, and to be fair, I would say the code base had been cleaned up quite a bit. I also mark my time there as that was the one place that I worked at. In my time there, if you took the number of lines of code I'd written as a metric, you would see minus 35,000 lines of code. You would start seeing those tick up. The lines of code people would write. You would start seeing defects ticking up slowly at first. It took a while to get the code base in shape. And so you would have a residual effect of that code base being well structured, that you would see a jump in productivity if you wanted to measure productivity by stories completed. And it would probably take 6 to 9 months for it then to start killing you. By then, the experiments, you're going to run the experiment for 1 to 3 months.
True, yeah, it's actually very difficult. No, to think about it, but like, okay, ideally, let's say you have some higher management that know this stuff, and they also try to enforce it. Let's say, also with key hires, but if you don't have this situation, is there actually any way to convince them, like with, I don't know, numbers, or like in your experience, what do you usually do to convince
One thing
people?
I did when I was coaching was I did a ensemble mobbing with just managers and the org leader, and it turned out awesome. Then they started promoting it on their team. It was fun. Like they weren't coders. I think one was coder, and they ended up loving it. And that was an experiment that worked. You could try again, is getting the managers into a mob themselves. And it opens their eyes. You don't even have to be with their own subordinates, just do it amongst themselves. And they'll see the value of it, right? So
and that to me is the takeaway to that. You can go to them with statistics. Lori Williams, Alistair Cockburn have some wonderful statistics, and they will come back and frequently folks do. Do you have any statistics that weren't done in 2002 to 2007? Do you have anything that's current? Which place I generally want to say, do you have any new research studies on gravity that prove gravity still works? I want to say that, I don't.
Well, it's a new tool set, right? It's a completely new generation of software.
Right, gravity can stop working at any minute. The Earth sucks. No.
Steve, you've heard, of course, haven't you, that in less than a generation, people can multitask better.
Yeah. So, but coming in, and you can find, if you do an internet search right now, you will find plenty of articles that talk about how pairing an ensemble is horrible and bad and hurt their productivity. They're opinions, they're not studies. They're blog articles from some good people, and maybe people in their org, and they're hearing from the people that don't want to ensemble directly from those people, which is a strong bias, not this consultant that's on the outside that is the paid expert to be here that you'd listen to, obviously.
One of my favorite retorts to that numbers question is, there are some really good studies about how collaborative work improves the output and the speed and the quality. There are no studies that show that working solo is more beneficial than collaborative work.
Mhm.
So until we get those studies where we can compare them, you can't tell me that solo work is better.
Right.
So,
But if we fall back on the rider and the elephant metaphor as to trying to convince people about change, it's experience. Back to
Yes.
Dave, get them, do an ensemble with them, create an exercise that they can experience and know the power of being on an ensemble. That to me is easily the best way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be coding. It can be, let's talk about it.
Story mapping, something like that, right? So, yeah.
Get all the managers in the room together and say, okay, what's one of your biggest problems, if you feel safe to bring it up?
And so one of the things like their subordinates might say, I'm afraid to mob and pair.
Yeah.
And they feel the same thing when you bring them together. Before it happens, they get all nervous, right? And that managers get, they told me I'm nervous, Dave.
Yeah.
And then after that nervousness goes away. And so if they have your subordinates saying, hey, we don't want to pair and mob because we're afraid, they're gonna be like, no, it's not, we did it together. It was no big deal. You should try it too. So it has to go top down. So
Yeah. Yep. All right. So maybe I've got some topics I could talk about in July. Oh, I see 18 messages. I haven't been keeping up in Slack. Okay. Seems like we've been going for a while. It's 11:30. I'm going to go ahead and call it. Unless I get a ping from someone, probably expect a topic of either you want help bringing ensemble development to your work? Let's talk about it. With ensemble, there was something else we wanted to talk about, maybe managers. How do you manage an XP team? Or how to convince your manager? I don't know.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll play with it.
How to manage managers.
How to manage up from an ensemble, from an XP team.
So we're a golden goose. How do you continue to get golden eggs? By not squeezing the goose too hard.
Yeah. Okay. You guys are great. I want to thank everyone for participating. Jeff, you did not talk very much, but you were typing quite a bit. That conversation was great. Sherry was here for a brief little bit towards the end, and she started putting in her comments. Other folks were doing comments. George, Todd, Dimitri, I think I'm not sure if you're still here. Thank you all for participating. If you didn't participate, hopefully next time you will. I hope everyone got something out of this. Paige, do you have anything you want to say?
I don't. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us.
Everyone be awesome.
All righty. Well, thanks. It was a good boost for me because I kind of needed a little bit of that old time religion. Plus,
Yeah.
I'm looking
Here,
for
here.
work soon.
Okay.
All right.